Hi, I start a job in approximately 4 weeks, which requires me to work from home. I'm required to have an office. I've never had an office before. This is currently my office. 4 weeks to turn this into something usable and professional looking. I don't know if I've got time to do it, but we're going to give it a crack.
As with all great journeys, they start with the first step. And the first step of me achieving my home office setup that I actually enjoy spending time in, I've got to build something for my desktop, my countertop to sit on. On one side, that's going to be a simple frame which will house my computer. On the other side, it'll be a chest of drawers, and that's what we're working on in this video. For all the new subscribers that have joined the channel, number one, thank you, I appreciate you, love you to death. And I just want to be clear, this is not the sort of channel that gives you tutorials on how to do things. This is me on my woodworking journey, learning things for the first time. I have not got a clue what I'm doing, I've never done anything like this before. And for those of you that have been with me from the start, I want to apologise that I'm using so much plywood at the minute. I know I started out using scrap and pallets, and I promise I'm not going to turn into use Baltic birch ply to do everything. But it's means to an end at the minute. I've got to get my house sorted, I've got my new job starting in about 3 weeks, and I have got nowhere to work. The main bulk of the project starts with me cutting down my sheet material to the right size and dimensions. Now I haven't got much of this sheet material left, and it's nearly doubled in price since I bought it, so I'm trying to be minimal with it. I'm going to have a side panel on each side and a bottom panel. Other than that, I'm going to be using bracing to try and save on some material. That will come back to bite me, as you'll see later in the video. After I've cut everything down to size, I'm using shallow passes on the router table to rebate a bit of a groove. I'm going to try and use a bit more advanced joinery on this one.
There's obviously a few more splinters doing it this way than a different way, and it might need a bit of sanding. However, it is a snug fit. Bit of glue, that's got to be bomb-proof. Very excited. I'm also on to my first dilemma. Now this small piece here represents the bottom, if you like. The drawers or the cabinet or whatever we're calling it is going to be stood up like that. Now that's going to give me space for either 3 very shallow drawers by the time I put a face frame on, or 2 bigger drawers. Haven't decided which yet. Why have I sacrificed this 100mm at the bottom then? Well, because I can't find pictures of drawers where the drawer goes all the way down to the floor, and then I thought, well, it's not really practical because it doesn't matter how strong your runners are, it's going to slide along the floor. Every picture I saw, there was some kind of toe kick or it was up on legs. I don't want legs, so I'm going to have a toe kick. However, I don't want the toe kick to be at the front, otherwise it's not really a toe kick. But I do want the side panels to be solid so they'll paint nicely. Don't want to have a base box to sit the whole thing on top of. So to get around that, I'm just going to cut there, and then have a built-in toe kick. My drawers, I'll do as I want, whether it's right or not.
And I did do as I wanted. And because I am now a professional woodworker who uses sheet material, it's only right that I have a pull saw. I bought this to help with skirting and have not used it because I hate it. What's wrong with a normal traditional saw? These just don't seem to work and it just irritates me. Anyway, I powered through and cut out that section. After persevering with the world's worst designed saw, I decided to mock everything up so that I could take some measurements. Now yes, I've measured everything out, I'm using the same tape measure, but from my past experience, I always like to then take the measurement off the real life product rather than just off a drawing. Sometimes you go a bit too heavy on the track saw, sometimes you go a bit too heavy on the router table. So I mock everything up, take some measurements, and then that tells me exactly how long I need to cut my brace pieces, which were the right length, but like I said, it will come back to bite me. I'm going to use pocket holes to attach the braces, which means I have to use the world's worst pocket hole jig after using the world's worst saw. However, it got the job done.
Ain't nothing to do but to glue. That was terrible, and I apologise.
He was right. That was terrible, and I cringe at myself every time I do these voiceovers. The glue up itself was fairly straightforward. Just slather glue everywhere that one piece of wood's going to touch another piece of wood. Use some clamps to hold things in place while you attach some screws, do the pocket hole parts, and Bob's your uncle. I hadn't taken into account, though, how to keep it square. And I didn't even think about how to keep it square during the glue up. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I wish I could travel back and tell Captain Confident, "You've ballsed up."
That went surprisingly smoothly. I learnt a few things in my last cabinet build, and hats off to cabinet makers. It requires such accuracy and precision. This is by no means perfect, and I know there's things that other people would do differently. I wanted to be able to get to the pocket holes from the inside. It's going to be drawers and nobody's going to be looking. There's certain things that I wanted for my peace of mind. I don't trust my own joinery. I've had a constant thought rolling around this little brain of mine while I've been doing this. Why haven't I tried something like this sooner? Why have I stuck to pallet wood? In my mind, I was practicing my skills because sheet material is expensive and you can't afford to just make mistakes and waste it. But I've decided working with pallet wood's scarier. The hours that goes into removing the nails, breaking down the pallet, milling it up to something usable, and then, stupid idiot here makes the wrong cut, and you've got to go and do it all again just to get a piece of usable material. So I think what I'm saying is, if you've been in my shoes and have been scared of using sheet material because it's expensive and you're worried you'll make a mistake, well, yeah, be scared. But it's not as scary as working with pallet wood, in my opinion. Having said that, I have only wasted a quarter of sheet through an error or two. I've done it again. Full steam ahead with a project. I've then walked away from it for 3 weeks because of life and the Euros. And I have come back to it with fresh eyes, but also a lack of motivation, which is weird. I think it's because I didn't like what I was planning to do. I like the box, it's worked well, it's fine. I was going to then put a face frame on it, and then the face frame I was going to stain it and then have the drawers painted. And one of the things that put me off working on it last weekend was I just didn't really like that idea. And I think I figured out why. I'm going to have a natural wood top, and the stain on that is not going to match up to the stain on the face frame because it's two different species of wood. So I think what I might do is do the face frame, paint the face frame, then have the drawer faces natural. That means I'll have to glue up the door faces. So I'm going to use this old skirting trim, door frame trim, skirting, whatever it is. It's got a round over. We were sent this by mistake. It was the wrong style. We never sent it back. So it's essentially free. Anyway, I'm going to use the Death Machine table saw, try and get some 40mm width lengths and make a face frame. Good thing is, because I'm painting it, it doesn't need to be mited or anything. Just going to brad nail it on, paint it, then drawer boxes.
As you can see from the Death Machine footage, I'm using all kinds of scraps here. I've got some test pieces that I was practicing using on the router table. I've got the lengths of skirting. These are all different shades of pine, if you like, but because it's all going to be painted, it just doesn't matter as long as it's the same thickness. I prepared way more of this than I actually needed because I think 40mm is going to be my go-to width for all of my face frames. I'm going to use quite a few face frames throughout the entire office build. So I basically cut some down to the lengths I needed and then sanded them. The death machine was an Aldi middle aisle purchase and it does not work very well. The blade is cheap and nasty and it does leave some of the milling marks on there. There's all kinds of saw burn and all sorts, so it does require quite a bit of sanding afterwards. But as I mentioned, this is essentially free wood, so like working with pallets, if it's free you don't mind putting in a bit of time to get it to a usable state. I didn't mess around with attaching the face frame parts together. I simply drilled some pocket holes, clamped everything down and in place and used a mixture of glue and the pocket hole screws. This will then attach to the cabinet, you'll never see it, you'll never know about it, and then I'm just going to brad nail it on afterwards. The brad nails can be covered with a bit of filler because it's all going to be painted.
Because I was a bit tight and a bit lazy, I decided not to have a back panel on this. Number one, you're never going to see it, and number two, it saves money. However, the back panel does do a good job of keeping things square in the glue up. Now, when I glued up this frame, I walked away from it for 3 weeks. I didn't check it. I didn't put any effort into keeping it square. I just glued it and left it. Now, I've got my face frame, which is square, flush there, but back here, it's about 12 mil out. Now I'm hoping I can wriggle and wrestle this thing so it's a bit more square. I think if I release some of the pocket holes and use a few weights, I can maybe do it. Doesn't need to stay square for very long on its own before it's going to be attached to the wall. And then it's going to have a big heavy countertop on top, which is not going to allow it any movement. It's just the whole getting the face frame on thing that I'm concerned about. It's all held together with 4 pocket screws. I can't fix it. I loosened the pocket screws, which with the glue gives it the flex to be square, but it just doesn't want to stay square. I didn't know whether to share this with you or whether to burn the whole garage down. That's how angry I am about this. The only potential fix I can see is, because there is the flex for it to be square without breaking all the glue joints, is to cut a back panel, make sure that's nice and square, and rather than take all this apart, which wouldn't really happen, the ply would come apart before the glue, I would just slot it in at the back and let it rest on the nailer strips. The square of the back panel should keep it as it's supposed to be, plus once the face frame's dried and glued on, might be square.
With this project looking like it was already down the Swanee, I didn't want to cut a back panel, so I thought, how can I fix this? I can't, so I'll just glue the face frame on anyway and just use a ton of brad nails and then hope that this mountain of ply can be brought square by a few strips of pine with some pocket holes in. The real kicker is, it actually worked. The face frame managed to hold everything straight just because the pocket holes were loose enough to let it flex. I was pleasantly happy with myself after this. I used liberal amounts of wood filler to fill in those brad nails and any seams, especially where the face frame attaches to the cabinet. It's all going to be painted, so you can do whatever you want.
Once again, the everlasting project. It's been another couple of weeks since I last touched this thing. The sun is glorious outside and I'd rather be out there, but I'm stuck in a dusty garage trying to get this done. Life's got in the way recently, but I've just finished my old job, I suppose. My new job starts in a few weeks and I need a home office, and this is all I've got to show for it at the minute. An unfinished chest of drawers. Now, I ordered these drawer slides off of the interwebs. They're from Amazon. They are a cheaper version of the Bloom ones, the Blum, whatever they're called. They are by a company called Reyes, R-E-J-S. They seem pretty nice, but they don't come with instructions. So I'm going to spend the next half an hour or so trying to figure out how to mount these. Now, because I've got this face frame on here, I am going to have to use some strips of wood to bring that out level so that my drawer slides will basically not catch on the face frame, because I want inset drawer faces. By the end of this glorious sunny day, I do want to have drawer boxes, drawer runners, this thing all done, ready to paint when I paint the rest of the project after I've started the rest of the project. Anyway, come on.
I had to make some minor adjustments to the frame of the cabinet. This was actually not one of my mistakes. I originally bought these drawer runners with the assumption that I wouldn't have an additional drawer face on the drawers. The plywood would be painted of the drawer box and that's the way it would work. Because of the extra 18-20mm drawer face I'm going to have, these drawer slides were no longer going to fit. I did, however, find an easy solution. I just drilled a bit of a hole so that the slide could run through the back. After that, I figured out the height of my drawer slides and then just screwed the battens into place. I used another piece of scrap ply as a spacer and then made sure that everything on both sides was completely equal. I'm not going to bore you guys with more cutting down of sheet material to make these drawer boxes. It's really simple. The left and right panels of the drawer box are the length of your drawer slides. Simple as that. Then you've got to figure out the width between the two edges of the drawer slides. You just measure that with a tape measure. And then that's your width of the box. Subtract the two side panels and then you've got your front and back. Then you've just got to cut a piece to fit as the base. In this case, I'm using the same 18mm ply for the left, right, front, back panels, and then for the base panel I'm using 12mm ply. I was going to skimp a little bit and go 9mm, but it was only a couple of quid extra and I think it'll keep it sturdier. Once everything's cut to size, you then have to cut out some little notches from the back panel. The drawer runners I've bought come with these plastic clips that clip onto the slides, but at the back you need to have space for the drawer runners to actually run through, for the drawer box to sit on.
You've never seen anybody use a saw like that, have you?
I then glued each drawer box up. Now I'm using a brad nailer to basically tack the sides in place, and after that, while they're held in place, I can come back through, I pre-drill some holes and then put some screws in the side of the drawer box. Now some people don't like the exposed screws, but you're only ever going to see them when you open the drawer. And as I said earlier, these are my drawers. I'll do as I want. And I don't care about seeing some screw heads when you open the drawer.
Now I probably should let all the glue dry first, but my main thought is if I ballsed it up in some way, I could maybe get it apart while the glue's still wet. So these are the parts that attach to the drawer. It took me a little bit of thinking, and I had to like tilt my head upside down because I'm working upside down, but these just push into the corner as far as they'll go. There's a couple of places for screws, and then in theory you just sit it on top of the runners, push it in, and that's it. Then to ever get the drawers out, you simply pinch that together, they'll slide right off. Now I've got to figure out if I can get my stubby little fingers to work with these tiny screws. Don't tip over. I did a thing that I've now got to do again. I did quite enjoy it, to be fair. Now it's a little bit skewed, mainly because I was playing with all these little dials. So what you can do is you can actually move the drawer left to right on a axes. You can also tilt the drawer down, lift it up a little bit, shimmy it left, shimmy it right. I was playing with these, so it's going to take some fine tuning, I can already see. Just needs tilting that way a bit. Now don't worry about the fact that when this is open, this wants to tip. Yes, these drawers are heavy, and yes, I did knock away a big chunk of it, but these are going to be fastened to the wall, and then they're also going to have a very heavy ash countertop on top once I order it. So now, I'm going to build another drawer box now. Now, I know it doesn't look pretty at the minute, but like I say, there's going to be drawer faces on these. I've kept a bit of tolerance because it's my first time doing it, and I know you'll be watching and everybody will spot a million mistakes, things I should have done different, but absolutely buzzing. I knew this would be difficult, and I didn't help myself by spacing out over 6 weeks, walking away from it, coming back, not remembering where I was or what I was thinking. But he's like, ah! Anyway, I am absolutely sweltering. It is boiling in this garage, and there is a cold beer in the fridge with my name all over it. Oh, tomorrow morning, I'll take it into the room, see what it looks like, see how much space it takes up. The absolute only plus side to painting is that there's no power tools involved. No need for safety. Anyway, the other plus side to this is that I don't have to paint it all. That side's going to be against the wall, that's going to have a countertop on, just a face frame, and this side. I've just got some wood and metal paint from B&Q to match the wall. See how it goes? So the drawer cabinet is inside, it's drying. I've put another coat of paint on it this morning, so that's pretty much ready to go. The drawers are all functioning. The only thing I've got left to do is my shaker style drawer fronts. Now I'm going to make these in exactly the same style as I did with the bathroom cabinet that I made in the last video. The only difference is I'm going to be using MDF in the middle panel. Now, I know that there's a lot of back and forth, especially in a lot of videos at the minute, of whether you should use plywood or MDF, and the moisture resistance MDF that you can get now is supposed to be really good. I've just got bad experiences with MDF. In my old home, I built a few things from MDF, built the supports for the shelves and everything, and it just bowed. Plus, we are very paranoid about any water damage in the house, and MDF does not do well with water, even the moisture resistant stuff. So I'm going to be using just these lengths of pine for the frame for my drawer faces, and then MDF in the middle because it's not near any water and I can sleep easy.
I'm not going to bore you with all the details of these shaker style doors. I made them in the last video, but basically it boils down to running them over the router table and trying to get to about a 10mm depth. Ideally, I'd want a 20mm depth to make assembly and the structure even better, but I've got no way of doing it. A lot of people will use their table saw and use the fence and get that depth that way, but I don't trust my table saw, I don't trust my fence. One thing that I have had success with is my router table, but I don't want to stress that router bit by trying to get it to 20mm depth. It's not worth it. And my bathroom cabinet doors are still holding up. So I ran all of the stiles and rails over the router table, only taking about 2 or 3mm depth with each pass, cranking up the table router and then taking off a bit more, taking it slow and steady, not stressing the blade. Anyway, after they were all done, I took them over to the miter saw and cut them down to their final length. Whenever I run anything over the table router, I like to leave a little bit of extra length just in case of any blowout at the end.
Okay, that was a lot of passes on the router table. Now I've trimmed my side braces, if you like, to the right height. These are not cut down yet. Now, the reason they're not cut down yet is because this part is where you have to use your brain, which is where I struggle. So my total entrance to the drawer is 922mm. Now I've got to take 6mm off, so there's a 3mm gap on each side, plus take 41 off for that, plus another 41 off for that. But then I've got to make the cut along here using the trenching feature so that I'm leaving my sticky outy things that might be called tenons to create a drawer that is just shy of 920 mil. I hate this part.
And I still hate this part. It's such a pain to come to this part and risk messing everything up. If that trenching feature goes too deep, you can't save it. So as you can see here, I'm going a bit too shallow and then I'm just knocking it down and creeping up to it. It worked out well, but it's not a pleasant process. After that was all done, I knew exact measurements for my middle panel. Now I'm using MDF, which is 12mm thickness, and those bits that I've routed in, those rebates, are 6mm. The idea is that I'll be able to knock some of this MDF back, and then I'll have the shaker style appearance on the front, but the back of the drawer face will sit flat. That's the plan.
So I've just been playing on the router table with a scrap piece of MDF, and that's what we're looking for. Very different to the stiles and rails of the shaker door. Now the idea is that that slots in there. You can see I've got a bit of tweaking to do so that one side sits flat, which will mount onto the drawer box itself, and the other side you get the shaker style. Now this is a very snug fit at the minute. I'm probably going to take it down just a little bit more. Now, yes, it might rattle if I were to fit it dry, but I'm actually going to paint these panels first before I fit it. When I did the bathroom, I didn't allow for the thickness of the paint. So I'm going to make that a little bit thinner and then knock the fence forward 1mm because there is just a slight gap there. Playing in minor details now.
So after making those couple of tweaks, it worked out perfectly. Now the great thing about MDF is you don't need to take shallow passes or anything because it's like cutting paper. The router bits just absolutely tear through it. So all I did was I ran it down one side, turned it the other side until I went all the way around and had that bit all cut out.
Shaker door front. That is flush on the back. Woodworking is brilliant when it goes right. I just want to stay here and be happy for a minute because the next thing is sanding and painting. And they are very sad things.
I sucked it up and I got on with it. And then after that I thought this might be easier to drill the pilot holes for the hardware now before I fix the drawer together. I didn't know how I was going to get it perfect. Now I've got a jig for putting on cabinet door handles, but it's for putting the handles on the edge, so I couldn't use it in this application, or so I thought. So I got clever. I found the centre of the panel and then I drew a little mark on the side and then I got some paper that I folded twice. Now the paper is cut to the perfect width and it gives me that centre line, and then I can use the cabinet handle jig to basically drill my pilot holes. I was quite proud of myself for this. After that was done, it was simply time for the glue up, which was one of the smoothest glue ups I've ever done. I used my long sash clamps and basically just made sure everything was flat, everything was level, applied minimal clamping pressure. With this style of door, you apply too much pressure, you squeeze all the glue out of those joints, is what I found anyway. It worked really well and I am so pleased with the outcome. Some woodworkers use playing cards to measure their reveals. I'm using double cards. It's the only use they get now, seeing as though my wife can't play it anymore because her smartwatch tells her she's having a heart attack. So I used the cards to get the reveal right, but it wasn't quite lining up, and I knew the reason why. It was because the drawer faces were square and the cabinet wasn't quite square. So I actually abandoned this plan and attached the cabinet to the wall first, and that brought everything just right.
So there we go. Phase 1 done. Is it perfect? Far from it. The out of square box came back to bite me a little bit when I was fitting the drawers, but I managed to fix it up by anchoring it to the wall, and it all worked as planned. I've still got to do a little bit of tweaking with the drawer runners. They can be set back a little bit, and you'll notice the reveal on this side, I think, from your angle, is a bit wider than on the other side. But like I said, there's some play to bring it over. That's all my concerns out the way. The thing that's making me really, really happy, despite the fact that I am dripping on this boiling hot day, is that if the rest of this room pleases me half as much as this, I might actually enjoy working in here. And I didn't think I'd ever enjoy a job. I can only apologise for the mammoth length of this video. I did not want to cut out my mistakes, and I hope you guys realise that by now, if I make a mistake, I will share it with you, in the hopes that you can avoid the same one. But it does make for a long video. In the next part, I'm going to be building a bit of a shelving unit on this side and installing an ash worktop that I haven't made, I have bought, but I'm going to see how that goes. If you could join me, it would make me very, very, very happy. Take care. Love you all. And I love you too.